Okay, so moving on to moving on to the positives and negatives of mainstreaming. And we'll start on the left with the positives. So the positives of mainstreaming are that it allows for the child to engage in general public society. And this kind of helps build the skills of learning how to navigate hearing society, learning what to expect of others, learning what to expect of yourself, learning how to be a self-advocate, learning how to ask for accommodations and which accommodations work for which scenarios. There's a lot of things that are up in the air that have to be kind of just tinkered with in every situation, and it takes a lot of time to learn that, but mainstreaming is definitely a good way to start learning all of those different processes in order to succeed in the hearing world, which leads us to our next bullet point down there, which says offers opportunity to succeed in the hearing world. By mainstreaming a deaf student, it introduces them to the hearing world at an earlier age and introduces them to the nuances that they're going to have to deal with in navigating the hearing world. Schooling in particular is definitely a tough thing to navigate as a deaf student, because you're not just dealing with, oh, I can't hear. You're dealing with, I can't hear. How do I find the right thing for me? How do I know what's right for me when I'm still learning myself? How do I feel okay and socially accepted when I'm asking for these accommodations that are definitely noticeable in the classroom that set me aside from my peers? And in that, the success of those nuances and learning them depends on the student body and how receptive the student body is to that as well. Going to the negatives of mainstreaming on the right side here, we start with talking about how mainstreaming often removes deaf children from their deaf culture exposures. Oftentimes in mainstreaming, deaf students are an anomaly. There's not often more than one. They're usually passing per se as hearing, and just kind of living in the hearing world. They don't know much about deaf culture usually because, again, we all know that almost 90% of deaf students' children are born to hearing parents. And so they're living in the hearing world at home. They're living in the hearing world at school. It's very rare that I think parents will have an in to deaf culture, and even to know that deaf culture could possibly mean so much to their deaf child when they see them seemingly flourishing in the hearing world. So that's definitely a hard thing to gauge. Second bullet point there is talking about how being the only deaf student can cause feelings of not fitting in, being abnormal. The U.S. Department of Education actually did a survey in 2019 of, at the time, enrolled college students and what the percentage of them were that were deaf. And it was a surprisingly small percentage of 1.3% of those students were deaf. So it's definitely, again, an anomaly, and you definitely feel like an odd fish in a sea of very similar fish. That being said, it's not always the worst thing to feel like the odd one out. There are instances where it can feel good, like being the only one that can read lips and picking up on different things. That's always fun.